I had always thought that old age was not a season, but a special state of mind. But in my 68 years, I have begun to realize that it is also a loneliness that comes as stealthily as the autumn fog that envelopes Coralville every morning in September. My name is Prudence Edmonds. It's been 2 years since I buried my husband Douglas. 38 years of marriage is no joke. When you live with someone for that long, their habits become yours, and their absence feels like phantom pain. I still make breakfast for two, sometimes I pour 2 cups of coffee, and it's only when the steam stops rising over the second one that I remember. There's no one to drink it in the mornings. I still wait for the sound of the water in the bathroom and the creak of the floorboards under his heavy footsteps. Douglas was a construction site inspector, not an elite profession, but he was proud that people lived in safe homes because of his work. We were never rich, but we weren't poor either. Our house on Oak Street, a small 2-story house with a porch, was paid for before Fenton turned 10. Fenton is our only son, the only child we managed to conceive after 5 years of trying and 3 miscarriages. Maybe that's why we spoiled him too much. Douglas always said a boy should have the best of everything: college internships, a car for his 18th birthday. We worked overtime, saved up, denied ourselves a lot of things so that Fenton would get a better education than we did. And here's the result. Our son is an information security specialist for a major insurance company, married to a woman who looks at me like I'm dirt under her shoes from a designer whose name I can't even pronounce, Indila. The name itself sounds pretentious. The first time I met her, I thought it was fictitious. Turns out her parents actually decided to give her such an unusual name. It means rare flower in Sanskrit. She explained with a look like I was obliged to know it. Indila works as a social program coordinator in the city government, a title that, as far as I could tell, hides behind organizing cocktail parties and taking calls from disgruntled citizens. But she talks about it like she runs at least the United Nations. I remember the first time Fenton brought her to our house for dinner. She looked around our house with ill-concealed contempt. Her gaze slid over the pictures on the walls, the furniture Douglas and I had bought back in the early 90s. The curtains I had sewn myself. She barely touched the roast I'd been working on all day. Citing her special diet charming, she said. Then, looking around the living room, it's so authentic. It's back in vogue now. You know, vintage style. Our furniture wasn't vintage, it was just old, but sturdy and comfortable. It's been 5 years since then. Fenton and Indila were married 6 months after they first met, and each year, the gulf between us grew deeper. My son's visits became infrequent, his phone calls short and formal. Indila almost never came to see me, preferring to send Fenton alone or finding reasons why they couldn't come together. After Douglas died, things got even worse. At the funeral, Indila wore a black dress that would have been more appropriate for a cocktail party than for saying goodbye to a person. She hurried Fenton along, glancing at her watch. She had an important appointment that day. You see, Mom understands, Fenton told me, squeezing my shoulders, doesn't she? Mom and I nodded because I didn't have the energy for conflict with my son at my husband's funeral. After Douglas died, there was an insurance policy, not a huge sum, but enough to keep me comfortable for a few years. Most widows my age would have invested that money in securities or deposited it. But I was never like most all my life. I worked as an accountant for a small logistics company. Numbers reports, balance sheets were my thing. I've seen how money moves, how it works, how it creates new money with the right approach. So when my longtime client, Oliver Britton, mentioned that he wanted to sell his downtown restaurant, the Old Maple, I saw an opportunity. The restaurant wasn't making Oliver a profit, not because it was bad, but because Oliver was completely clueless about finances. I analyzed his books for 3 years and realized that if managed properly, the place could be very profitable. Are you serious, Prudence? Oliver asked me when I offered him the deal. At your age, after everything that's happened. Exactly, because at my age and after everything that's happened, I replied, I need something to fill my days. Oliver and I believe in this restaurant. We made a deal. I became the owner of the Old Maple. It was a decision I made on my own, without consulting anyone. Fenton found out I'd done something with the insurance money, but I didn't tell him the details. He was too busy with his life to be interested in the details. I hope you didn't spend it all on something stupid, he said during one of the rare calls I assured him I was fine and changed the subject. The first few months of owning the restaurant were tough. I worked hard. I revamped the menu with the help of talented chef Elias Trent, whom I had poached from another establishment, changed the accounting system, and sourced better products. The results did not wait long. Within 6 months old, Maple became one of the most popular restaurants in Coralville, known for its cozy atmosphere and excellent food. I didn't advertise my ownership of the restaurant to customers and most of the staff. I was just an elderly lady who occasionally stopped in for tea and a chat with the manager. Only Elias' manager, Raymond, and the bookkeeper knew that I was the one signing their checks. This secrecy gave me a strange satisfaction in a world where I was increasingly considered invisible, an older woman who could be overlooked in line, not listened to in conversation. I had a power that no one suspected. I rarely thought about how Douglas felt about my career as an accountant. He was proud of me, but sometimes joked that I took the numbers too seriously. Life is not a ledger. Prudy, he used to say, not everything can be calculated and balanced. He was right, but now that he's gone, I've realized that it's that ability to calculate and plan that keeps me afloat. My new life took on a certain rhythm. Mornings were spent doing chores, then driving to the restaurant, checking reports, communicating with the staff, sometimes helping with purchasing or planning special events. Evenings were spent at home, reading or watching old movies that Douglas and I loved. Once a week, I played bridge with a group of elderly ladies from the neighborhood, the only social activity I allowed myself. Fenton called about once a month, the conversation short and perfunctory. How are you, Mom? Everything. Okay, need anything? I always replied that I was fine. Didn't need anything. No worries. Sometimes I wanted to tell him the truth, that I was lonely, that I missed the times when we were a family, that I could feel him growing more distant every day. But I kept silent. Pride, perhaps, or just the realization that some bridges can no longer be rebuilt. Sometimes I thought about how Fenton had changed since meeting Indila. My boy was always sensitive, attentive. He could spend hours listening to Douglas's stories about construction sites or my stories about complicated accounting transactions. He helped neighbors without expecting thanks and always stood for justice. But Indila changed him. Under her influence, he became more calculating, more cynical. He started talking about status, about connections, about the importance of being in the right circle. His concern for justice was replaced by a concern for his career. He spoke less and less of old friends and more of new acquaintances from the Indula world, people with prestigious positions and the right last names. I remember the day I first truly saw these changes. Fenton and I were sitting on the veranda. Douglas was still alive, but lying in the hospital after his first heart attack. Fenton had come alone and Dilla was at some important event. Papa was always so stubborn, he said, looking at the garden that Douglas had lovingly cultivated for years. If he had taken care of his health like I told him, this wouldn't have happened. Your father always lived life to the fullest. I objected. He didn't want to spend his days counting calories and taking blood pressure. And this is the result. Fenton said with a chuckle. It's a good thing he had decent insurance. Treatment's expensive. I looked at my son back then and I didn't recognize him. When did he start measuring his father's life by money? When did he forget that Douglas worked 2 jobs to pay for his college? When did he think he had the right to judge the man who gave him everything? I didn't say anything. I stayed silent, as I'd done too often in recent years. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I should have told my son the truth more often, instead of trying to keep the peace at all costs. Douglas died 6 months after that conversation. A second heart attack proved fatal. The doctor said it was too strong. His heart just couldn't take it. How ironic his strength had become his weakness. At the funeral, Fenton kept a low profile. He made the proper speech about what a good father Douglas had been, how much he had taught him, how much he would be missed. The words sounded right, but I couldn't feel the sincerity in them. It was like a son doing a duty, not saying goodbye to his father after the funeral. Life moved on. I learned to live alone. I learned not to expect calls from my son, not to rely on his visits. I focused on the restaurant, and it saved me from the depression that waited around every corner in an empty house. The old maple became my outlet. I would go there early in the morning, when the cooks were just starting work, and leave late at night, when the last customers had finished their coffee. I knew every employee by name, knew their stories, their problems, and their joys. They became like a family to me, the family I no longer had. I became especially close to Elias. This 30-year-old chef with an innate talent for cooking treated me with a respect I hadn't seen from my own son in a long time. He would consult with me about the menu, tell me about new culinary trends, sometimes even ask me about personal problems. I knew that he had recently broken up with his girlfriend, that his mother had diabetes and lived in another state, that he dreamed of opening his own restaurant someday. "You're my inspiration, Mrs. Edmonds," he said one day as we sat in an empty auditorium after closing time. "If you were able to start a new business at your age, then I can take a chance on you when the time comes." I didn't tell him that my risk had been carefully calculated, that I had studied every possible scenario before investing in the restaurant, but his words warmed my soul. It's nice to know that someone sees you, not just as an old woman, but as someone capable of decisive action. The day the dinner invitation arrived, I was sitting in my office in the back of the restaurant. It wasn't a letter or a card, but a messenger message from Fenton. "Mom and Dilla and I would like to invite you to dinner this Friday, 5 years since our wedding anniversary. Old Maple Restaurant, 7 p.m. The reservation is under the name of Edmonds. Confirm you're coming?" I stared at the phone screen and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of all the restaurants in town, they'd chosen mine and they didn't even know it. My first inclination was to write something like, "Oh, what a coincidence. I just happen to own this place." But something stopped me. Maybe it was the fatigue of constantly trying to get along with my son and daughter-in-law, who seemed to be just waiting for an excuse to express their disapproval of my life. I decided that I would attend this dinner without saying anything about my situation. We'll see how events unfold. After all, it was their holiday, and I didn't want to overshadow it yet. "Thank you for the invitation, son. Of course, I'll be there." "Congratulations to you," I wrote back. I then called Raymond, my property manager, and alerted him to the situation. "On Friday, my son and his wife will be having dinner at our place. The reservation is under the name of Edmonds. They don't know I own the restaurant, and I'd like to keep it that way for the time being." "I understand, Mrs. Edmonds," Raymond replied. "We'll treat you as an ordinary guest. But may I ask, why the secrecy?" I wondered. Why didn't I want them to know? Maybe because I'd anticipated their reaction in Dealer's condescending surprise, Fenton's awkwardness, or maybe it was because I knew in Dealer would find a way to ruin even this small victory of mine, to make it seem insignificant or even ridiculous. "It just happened," I said at last. "Family matters are always complicated, Raymond. You'll understand when your children are grown." Raymond nodded. He had a teenage son himself, and he'd probably experienced the first signs of the estrangement that often occurred between parents and children. "The table will be ready," he assured me, and the staff would be briefed. I thanked him and went back to work, but thoughts of the upcoming dinner didn't leave me. I imagined various scenarios, replayed possible dialogues in my mind. What would Indila say when I met her? What remark would she come up with this time to let me know that I didn't fit into their life? The last time we saw each other, it was Christmas 6 months ago. She remarked that my sweater was so cute retro, and then asked if I'd like her to set up a consultation with a stylist for me. I have a friend who specializes in working with older clients. She helps them look age-appropriate but stylish. Fenton was silent, then only casting a quick glance at his wife that I couldn't decipher. Was it a reproach or a tacit agreement with her assessment? I declined the stylist's help as politely as possible, though I was seething inside. Indila shrugged. "Suit yourself." Just wanted to help. Her tone clearly said, "See, I'm trying to be kind, and you don't appreciate it." After that meeting, I decided I would no longer settle for family holidays. Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, all of these would now go on without me. Let Fenton and Indula enjoy their perfect life, with no room for an aging mother with unfashionable clothes and outdated attitudes, and now this dinner invitation. Why did they suddenly decide to include me in their anniversary celebration? Did Fenton feel a prick of conscience after all? Or was Indila up to something I had no idea about? Whatever it was, I decided to go. Go and not just go. I decided to look as good as I could at my age. Let Indila choke on her advice about stylists. The next day, I went shopping, a thing I hadn't done in a very long time. I usually ordered clothes online, choosing simple, practical things, but now I wanted something special. There weren't many good stores in the Coralville Mall, but I was lucky enough to find a dress that fit me perfectly. Dark blue, with long sleeves and an elegant neckline. It emphasized what was still worth emphasizing and hid what was better hidden. The saleswoman, a woman about my age, nodded approvingly when I came out of the fitting room. "It suits you very well." She said, "It looks good with silver jewelry." I had a silver sapphire necklace that Douglas had given me for our 30th wedding anniversary. I rarely wore it. It was too expensive, too special, but now was probably the right time. I bought a dress, low-heeled shoes, even a new purse. I spent more than I usually spend on clothes, but I figured I could afford it. After all, the restaurant was making a good profit, and my daily expenses were minimal. On the way home, I thought about how Indila would react when she saw me in my new outfit. She'd probably find something to pick on, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. I wasn't buying this dress for her. I was buying it for me at home. I hung my purchases in the closet and decided I still needed to do my hair. My gray hair had long since grown out and looked unkempt. I made an appointment with the hairdresser for Thursday, the day before dinner. I spent the rest of the days before the meeting in my usual preoccupations. The restaurant needed attention. We were preparing for a fall menu update, and Elias had some interesting ideas to discuss. In addition, one of the vendors had raised their prices, and I was looking for alternatives. Wednesday night, I got a call from Fenton. A rare occasion, he usually preferred to text Mom, "Are you sure you're coming on Friday?" He asked, without preamble, "Of course, son. I already bought a new dress." I replied, trying to keep my voice light-hearted good. He said quietly, "Look, Indela is a little nervous. You know how she is about important dates. Everything has to be perfect. I'll try not to spoil her perfect evening." I said, unable to contain my sarcasm. "Mom," he sounded annoyed. "Let's not do this." "Okay. I just want the evening to go well, no pressure." I sighed. It's always the same. Fenton wants everything to go smoothly, but he expects only me to make concessions. Never Indula. "All right, son, I'll be on my best behavior, I promised. And congratulations again. 5 years is a serious date." "Thanks, Mom." His voice softened a little. "I'll see you on Friday." After the conversation, I sat in the chair for a long time looking at the pictures on the mantel, Douglas and Fenton on a fishing trip when my son was about 10. Fenton in his graduation suit in front of the college. Our family photo taken the year before Douglas died is the last time we were truly happy together. How did we get to this point? When did my son start looking at me through his wife's eyes? When did I stop being a mom and become an inconvenient responsibility? I didn't know the answers to these questions, but I did know one thing: Friday would be the day something changed. Maybe it would be the end of the shaky construct that Fenton and I called a relationship, or maybe it would be the beginning of something new. Either way, I was ready. On Thursday, I went to the hairdresser, Mrs. Paul, a lovely woman who'd cut my hair for years. Was surprised when I asked, not just for a trim as usual, but a real haircut. "Special occasion?" she asked. Going through my gray strands, you could say that I smiled dinner with my son and daughter-in-law. "Oh, how nice." Mrs. Paul said, "Family gatherings are always so important." I didn't try to dissuade her. Why let a stranger in on the complexities of my relationship with my son? When my hair was done, I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. Mrs. Paul had arranged my hair in an elegant, but not overly elaborate style that made my face look more open, accentuating my cheekbones and eyes. "It looks great on you," she said, turning my chair so I could see the result from all angles. You look at least 10 years younger. I wasn't sure about 10 years, but I looked really good. Suddenly, I realized that I was looking forward to Friday night's dinner, not with anxiety, but with some strange anticipation. The day before dinner was unusually hectic. In the morning, I stopped by the restaurant to check orders and sign some papers. Raymond, my manager, caught me at the entrance to the office. "Mrs. Edmonds, about tomorrow night. I will personally see to it that everything goes perfectly. Your son's table is already reserved in the far corner, overlooking the garden just the way you like it, you." "Thank you, Raymond." I nodded. "Just please don't give me away early. No special privileges, no hint of who I am." He smiled understandingly, "Of course, you'll be just another guest. But let me ask you, are you sure this is a good idea, hiding from your son that you own a restaurant?" I sighed. Raymond was right. The whole secret thing did seem a little childish, but every time I pictured Indolent's face as she learned the truth, I felt grim satisfaction. "I'm not hiding it on purpose, Raymond, it just happened." Fenton never took much interest in my affairs after his father died, and when I hinted that I was doing something new, he just dismissed it as the whims of a bored old woman. Raymond nodded understandingly. He was in his early 40s, and he himself had a difficult relationship with his parents. He often said that working with me helped him understand his mother better. "Well, tomorrow will be an interesting evening," he said. "Elias is preparing a special menu, by the way. Nothing extravagant, but he wants you to be proud of the cuisine." "I am proud," I smiled. "Tell him it's nothing special. Let it be business as usual." I left the restaurant and went to the beauty parlor. I usually did my own manicures, but today I decided to treat myself. The technician, a young woman with bright pink hair and kind eyes, suggested a few shades. "Something neutral," I asked. I didn't want to attract attention. "You have beautiful hands," she said, "working on my nails, but you don't show them. You hide your fingers all the time as if you were embarrassed." I looked at my hands in surprise. Indeed, in recent years, I'd gotten into the habit of keeping them crossed or in my pockets, especially around Indola, who always showed off her impeccable manicure and expensive rings. It started at one of the first family dinners when Fenton first introduced us. We were sitting in a restaurant, not mine. I was still working as an accountant at the time, and I was gesticulating while telling some story. Indola suddenly interrupted me. "Oh, Prudence, you should try paraffin hand baths. They work wonders on mature skin." My mom had those age spots. I half-worded that my hands are the hands of a woman who's worked her whole life. Yes, they had spots, and the skin wasn't as firm as it had been when she was younger, but Indola's voice sounded as disgusted as if my hands were contagious. Fenton coughed awkwardly. "Indila just wants to help Mom. Her mother is very self-aware." In that moment, I felt for the first time that my son had chosen a side, and it wasn't my side. After that dinner, I bought expensive hand cream and started wearing gloves, even in not too cold weather, and then I got into the habit of hiding my hands. Done. The master's voice brought me back to reality. "What do you think?" I looked at my nails. They were covered with pale pink nail polish, neatly filed and looked well groomed, but not flashy. "Very nice. Thank you." I thanked him sincerely. "Wear your hands open," advised the master. "They tell your story better than any words." I smiled and paid, leaving a generous tip. That girl with the pink hair had just taught me a lesson in confidence without realizing it. At home, I pulled out of my closet the dress I'd bought especially for tomorrow night's dinner. Dark blue had always been my color. Douglas had said it emphasized the color of my eyes, made them look like deep lakes. Such trite but nice compliments. I missed them so much. Trying on the dress, I remembered the last time I dressed up for a family dinner. It was Christmas. 2 years ago, Fenton had unexpectedly invited me to their house. Indila was against it, that much I knew for sure. My son had blurted it out during a phone call. "But darling, it's my mother. It's just one night." His voice sounded pleading. I came dressed up and with gifts. Indila met me at the door with a strained smile. Their house was impeccably decorated like the cover of a magazine, but completely lifeless. No children's drawings of Santa Claus, and no homemade jewelry, and none of those odd and ridiculous trinkets that accumulate in families over the years and become part of tradition. During dinner, Indila talked incessantly about her work, about important people she was meeting, about plans for a vacation in Europe. Fenton looked at her with adoration, occasionally inserting brief comments. They hardly noticed me until I myself asked a question about their plans for the children. There was an awkward silence. Then Indela answered dryly, "We're not planning children. Prudence, at least not for the next 5 to 7 years. Career first, then everything else." "But you're both in your 30s?" I said cautiously. "Time is ticking." Mom Fenton's voice sounded warning. "It's our decision, of course." I agreed quickly. "I just thought exactly." Indila interrupted with a smile that didn't affect her eyes, "You thought. And we decided there's a difference, isn't there?" I felt myself blush with humiliation. Fenton didn't intervene again. He studied his plate with such interest, as if the secrets of the universe were written there. After dinner, Indila suggested we play a board game. She chose something complicated with many rules, which she explained in cursive. I kept getting it wrong, and Indila sighed each time with deliberate patience. "Let me explain it again, Prudence, very slowly," she said, as if she were talking to a child or someone with mental problems. I couldn't stand it. "I'm not stupid, Indila. I just haven't played this game before." "Of course you're not stupid." Her smile became even more condescending. "It's just that some people have a harder time learning new skills as they get older. It's a scientific fact." Fenton coughed. "Shall we have some tea? Mom, do you want tea?" Typical Fenton, avoiding conflict at all costs. I nodded, swallowing my resentment. Tea came in the dainty cups I'd given them for the housewarming party. At least they'd use them instead of hiding them away. When I left, Fenton walked me to the cab. He looked guilty, but didn't say anything about Indela's behavior. Just gave me a hug and mumbled, "Thanks for coming, Mom. It was good. It wasn't good, and we both knew it." But I just nodded and got in the car. Looking out the window at the receding figure of my son, I realized I wouldn't be coming to their house again, and maybe it was my fault. I hadn't fostered self-respect in my son, hadn't taught him to stand up for what was right. Douglas was a kind but gentle father, and me, I was always giving in, always compromising, and this is the result. 2 years have passed since then. We met rarely and always in public places. Fenton called occasionally, but our conversations became shorter and more formal. I knew he felt guilty, but not guilty enough to make a difference. I hung the dress back in the closet and walked over to the dressing table. On it was a jewelry box, few but dear to me. I opened it and pulled out the silver sapphire necklace Douglas had given me for our 30th anniversary. It would go perfectly with the dress as I tried it on in front of the mirror. I remembered when Douglas had handed me that box, we were sitting in a restaurant, not too expensive, but cozy. He was nervous like a teenager on a first date and kept checking his jacket pocket for the gift. "Prudy," he said, using my pet name that only those closest to me knew. 30 years ago, I promised to love you forever. And you know what? I kept that promise. I cried right there at the table, not because of the necklace, although it was beautiful and cost more than we usually spend on gifts, but because of those simple words spoken with such sincerity. Indila calls such displays of affection trite and melodramatic. She prefers rational relationships based on a mutually beneficial partnership. That's what she said at that ill-fated Christmas meeting. I wondered then, is my son really happy in such a rational relationship? Doesn't he crave simple, sincere words of love? I put the necklace back in its box. Tomorrow would be a big day and I needed sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about dinner. What would I say to Indela if she started her barbs again? How would I react if Fenton remained silent again, letting her humiliate me? How much longer will I put up with this for the illusion of a family relationship? Maybe it's time to just let go. To recognize that my son has grown up and chosen his own path, even if that path leads him away from me. Maybe the kindest thing I can do for him is to relieve him of his sense of obligation, of the need to call occasionally, and invite him to dinners that bring no joy to anyone. The thought was painful, but it had its truth. I got out of bed and walked to the window. Coralville was quiet at night, Only sparse lights burned in the windows of the neighboring houses. Somewhere out there live families happy, and not so happy, whole and broken, loving and hurting. Ordinary people with their ordinary problems. I remembered how once, before Fenton was married, we had talked to him about my mother. She was a complicated person, demanding and often unfair. We rarely spoke to each other in the last years of her life. Don't you have any regrets? Mother Fenton asked then that you weren't closer to her. Sometimes I do, I answered honestly. But relationships are always a two-way road. You can't go it alone. No matter how much you want to, I'll never keep my distance from you. My son promised. Then squeezing my hand never. And that's where we are now, the irony of fate. I went back to bed and did fall asleep, but my sleep was restless. I dreamt of Douglas trying to tell me something, but I couldn't make out the words. I woke up with a sense of loss and a firm resolve. Tonight, I would be me. I won't try to please Indila. I won't keep quiet if she oversteps her bounds. And yes, I will tell them about the restaurant, but only when I decide it's time. Friday morning began with rain, a fine drizzling rain typical of September in our area. I made coffee and sat by the window watching the drops drip down the glass. In this kind of weather, one feels especially lonely. I thought about how my life had changed in the last 2 years after Douglas died. I was sure I would just live out the rest of my days buried in memories and regrets, but instead, I've become a restaurant owner, made new friends among the staff, and learned things about myself that I didn't even realize before. Like that. I have business acumen and intuition that I can make decisions that affect the well-being of others, that I am capable of starting a new chapter of life at an age when many people have already put a stop to it. Indila will never believe that old Prudence can run a successful business. She thinks I am a relic of the past, a woman who has been an appendage to her husband all her life, and now widowed and inconvenient liability to her son. But I'm no longer the woman Indila knew. I've changed. I've grown stronger, and today I'm going to show her that. After breakfast, I went to the restaurant. I had to check some details before the evening. Mrs. Edmonds, everything is ready for tonight. The table's reserved. The staff has been briefed. No one will give away your secret. Thank you, Raymond. I touched his arm in gratitude. You know, I've been thinking about this all night. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Time to show my son and his wife who I really am. I think it's the right thing to do. He nodded. Secrets are rarely good for family relationships. It's not just about secrets, I sighed. It's about respect. They don't respect me. Maybe when they hear about the restaurant, they'll start to see me, not as just an old woman, but as someone who can do more. Raymond looked at me doubtfully. That's not how respect works. Mrs. Edmonds, it can't be earned by accomplishments. It's either there or it's not there. He was right, of course. But I still wanted to see the look on Indila's face when she found out she was dining at her mother-in-law's restaurant. I spent several hours at the restaurant, checking the bills and discussing new items on the menu with Elias. He was thrilled with the idea of introducing seasonal pumpkin and apple dishes, a fall classic, but with original touches. Are you sure you don't want me to prepare something special for your table tonight? He asked for the umpteenth time. Absolutely sure? I replied firmly. No favors. I want them to appreciate the restaurant as it is for all diners. Leaving the restaurant, I headed home to get ready for the evening. I had a few hours to clean myself up and mentally prepare for the meeting. I took a long bath using the scented oils a co-worker had once given me for special occasions. She had said at the time, well, today was just such an occasion. Drying myself off with a soft towel, I caught my reflection in the mirror, the body of a 68-year-old woman with sagging skin, age spots and the marks of 2 births, one of which ended in a late-term miscarriage. Not the body they show in anti-aging cream commercials, a real body with a real story. I remembered Indila once telling me at the dinner table that she keeps herself in shape so that she doesn't turn into a Shah,